So I want to start by asking you guys a question. Pretty simple one. What did you do last weekend? Can you remember? Sometimes I can't remember. So I want to talk to you guys about a movement and a process which is called prototyping and why I think it might just change the world. I want to introduce you guys to some amazing people first. This is Emily, Winnie, and Matt. And these guys are changing the way that transportation works in San Francisco. And they have a project called Smart MUNI. It's an iPad application that lets line managers, operators, and the central command center communicate in real time in ways that they've never been able to do before. Next people I want to introduce you to are Bonnie, Tina, Patrick, and Emily. And these guys are changing the way that we use spaces in our city. They have a project called Square Foot. And this project matches underused spaces that are in need of revitalization with pop-up entrepreneurs, artists, and businesses that need space. Simple concept, powerful impact. And what's amazing about both of these projects is that they were both prototyped in 48 hours. They started in a weekend, and not just that they started in a weekend, but none of these guys knew each other beforehand. They had never worked together before. So why is this powerful? So this is part of a movement called hackathons, and they're these weekends built around rapid prototyping. In San Francisco, we're very familiar with them. Elsewhere, I think they're just starting to take hold, but the idea is the same, despite many of the names that they've been called across the country, hackathons, code sprints, things like this. They're all the same. Take an idea as far as you can in 48 hours. And this is an incredibly powerful concept. If you're familiar with the Facebook like button or the Facebook timeline, then you've seen the outputs of hackathons. You may have never been to one yourself before. After this talk, I hope you'll reconsider that and try to go find one. But the point is that these started off inside companies to develop new features, to take new approaches to products. And working in the private sector, they were very effective. But now we're seeing this approach applied across the board, across a number of solutions, across a number of problems in cities and elsewhere, in social problems and in art. And if you're wondering what an organization called Gray Area Foundation for the Arts has to do with any of this, it's that we were founded in 2008, seeing a sort of chasm between the creative community and the technology community here in the Bay Area. And we wanted to explore applications of digital media that could be applied to creative expression and to social commentary. And we took this on in one of the most challenging neighborhoods in the city, in the heart of the Tenderloin. So we opened up in 2009 in a space which was formerly a porn arcade on a block whose crime rate is 33 times 3,300% the city average. This is not your average block by any means, and this context really shaped the direction of our work in ways that we never could have predicted. This is a project out on the street at a festival we did called City Centered, which was exploring applications of this type of media in the community and working directly with local organizations. And we saw immediately that these tools have the potential not to just be applied or imposed on a community like this one, where they were new and out of context in many ways, but that they could be developed with the community, and that tools like this could inform existing processes and organizations. So this is where the first story of my first hackathon comes into play, which I still remember fondly. I'm looking a little grizzled in this picture because we've been working all weekend. But the team that I worked with this weekend, there ended up being about 12 of us. And it was part of an event called the Great Urban Hack, which was, again, this process, taking an idea as far as you can in 48 hours. And we had a team of designers, coders, journalists going out into the community to capture stories and see what was happening in the neighborhood. And this is what we came up with. It was a prototype called We All Need. And it was built to build upon the existing community needs assessments that were developed by the city to figure out what's going on in the neighborhood, what people need, and what they were thinking about. So we asked people 2 questions. What do you need, and what are you thinking about right now? We asked 75 people these questions on the street in a weekend. We recorded the interviews, we transcribed the interviews, we edited the interviews, we put them online, we designed a map interface, we put photos of people online that were willing to share their photos, their names and their ages. And you could make up your name, you could tell your real name. We had people say they were Batman and things like that. The point was that there was this layer of privacy that was lifted off of these micro stories on the street that told us a lot about what was going on. We had people say, I need chocolate chip cookies, I need drugs, I need a job, I need love, I need money, across the gamut, and it paints this really compelling picture. And again, this is something that was we just wanted to see what would happen in 48 hours. It was an experiment. More than this prototype, what came out of these weekends is community. And this group of people who I still work with to this day, we share a bond of something that we created, even if it's just a prototype. And that act of creating something with other people is fundamentally more powerful of a bond than can be created by almost anything else. And so shortly after this, I found myself on the other side of the equation, trying to convince a room full of people that they could change the world, or at least start to do that, to prototype what that change could look like in 48 hours. And as a GAFFTA employee, I was fortunate that people actually believed me and went out and tried to do this, and actually did it more so than I ever could have imagined. Last year, we produced a project called the Summer of Smart, and we wanted to see the value of what would it look like if we took these intense prototyping weekends, these short periods of innovation, and applied them to a broader context of something that was already happening in the city. In this case, it was the mayoral race. And if you're not from San Francisco, you might be surprised to learn that we had 16 mayoral candidates last year. If you're from here, this is normal San Francisco politics. We only had 16, et cetera. But in this case, what's amazing about having 16 candidates is that they're all competing relentlessly for great ideas. And what's more valuable than an idea is a working asset, is a prototype of that idea. And to riff on TED a little bit, we realized that if we created ideas worth stealing, this would be the best way to further these ideas on a political platform and actually get them implemented, and it totally worked. And so at the end of the summer, the 4 winning projects presented to all 16 mayoral candidates. This is the first time in political history, we believe, that citizens have created projects and presented them to candidates in the course of an election to show not what will you do for us, but here's what we've already done, here's how it would work if you work with us, and how are you going to do it? And I think that was fundamentally a change in mentality that was incredibly important and will be incredibly important to the future of the city, and taking these projects from prototypes to pilots. So Emily and their team Smart MUNI project is now a city pilot and is going into effect 15 months after this initial hackathon. You start with a spark, you take it to something more meaningful. The next project we did this year was called Creative Currency. And again, this premise of trying to build something in 48 hours that will actually have a real impact is a little bit ridiculous. And some people would say that it's naive, right? And so we wanted to see what would happen if you took that weekend out and exploded it, blew it up a little bit, spent some time beforehand understanding what people needed and grounding them, grounding the teams in the reality of their context in a really meaningful way. And then beyond the weekend, taking people to the next level. So we started out for the first 2 months by doing community research. We interviewed 16 organizations, we surveyed 150 businesses and individuals, and that input went into the prototyping process. So this was the starting point. You're not starting completely from scratch, you're starting from a deep understanding of what's going on in the community that you're working in. And afterwards, these teams are still working together, creating real impact. This is a prop-up from the Square Foot project. They went out a couple months ago and planned an entire day of events and pop-up businesses and shops and underused spaces. This is 6 months after the initial hackathon. And what's amazing about these weekends for me is the passion that people bring and the dedication they bring to these projects. This isn't about the end of a process. It's about the beginning of a process. And 30,000 hours later, after these 10 events that we've run in the last 15 months or so, people have contributed an obscene amount of their time, an unbelievable amount of their time to this stuff. And it's because of the power of these ideas that are generated in a short period of time. And so, again, we've been doing this for 15 months. This has essentially been where all of my personal time has gone. And somebody asked me this question, which I thought was really existentially jarring in a way, but also really helpful, which was describe what you do to a 10-year-old. And there's social innovation and cities and urbanization and all of these concepts. 10-year-olds don't care about that. So what I came up with after some thinking and self-reflection was just that I bring people together to make things. And this is kind of a fundamentally new job description, which I don't think has existed except for maybe some Amish barn raisers or something in the past. But it's really exciting to me because I think everyone has the power in them to be an organizer, and most importantly, every organizer has the power to create prototypes, not just meetings and not just discussions. And so Tom Kelly, who's co-founder of IDEO, said this better than I think anyone else. And he said, prototyping is the shorthand of innovation. Prototyping is about problem solving because it creates things so quickly and effectively. But most importantly, he said that prototyping is a state of mind, and it's this point that I really want to hammer home. Because when a lot of people change their states of mind at the same time, it's called a revolution. Okay? And so could we have a revolution that's about changing all of our states of mind away from having meetings about meetings, plans about plans, and instead build things together really fast? To fail fast and apply this mentality of experimentation to every single problem that we produce. And in hearing Jeffrey West talk about how we need to innovate faster, this is, I think, fundamentally the back end, the answer to that question. And what's amazing about Tom Kelly's thoughts on this is that this happened in 2001. He wrote this 11 years ago, which is roughly one eternity in technology time, before any of this stuff had happened, before we had mobile internet in our pocket, before we had social media and a way to communicate ideas around the world instantaneously, before we had open source design and coding tools and platforms to share these tools and iterate upon them. So in just 10 years, we now have the capacity to prototype an idea, iterate upon it, deploy it in one place, and scale it. And this is fundamentally a different working model than we've ever had before in human history. And I think it's really exciting. So I think that this revolution, I'll call it the prototyping revolution, I think it's extremely powerful because it requires all of those other ones to exist. It couldn't exist before this moment in time in history because it relied upon all of the others. And so it requires a shift in mentality and a state of mind, as well as all these other technology tools that we have available to us to really create impact from this stuff. And when everyone is empowered to be a creator, to be a maker, to take a part in building their own city, their own community, I don't think there's anything that could be more democratic than that. When we talk about democracy and government, by the people, it's a little bit abstract. We vote for someone, they make decisions for us. We're not making things. We're not creating a solution ourselves. And this goes both ways. If you're a politician and you see an idea that's better than what you have, you should get kicked out if you don't implement it. And if you're a citizen, you shouldn't just complain. You should go do something and show what the alternative looks like. So what's the role of the arts in all this? Anton Chekhov said the role of the artist is to ask questions and not just answer them. And I think this is a really powerful concept because this is what prototyping is all about, ultimately. It's about asking questions. Another event we produced was called Art Hack Weekend. And one of the projects created there was called Party Line. And this was a really fun project and got a lot of laughs out of the crowd because what it did was scrape 20,000 phone numbers from Craigslist and dial 40 of them into a conference call with each other at the same time without telling them. And if you've never been on a conference call with 40 other people that didn't know they were on a conference call with 40 other people, it's really, really fun. But most importantly, this is a social statement. What does it mean that we can now do this? That we can take listings of various random objects and connect the people that are selling them in a completely arbitrary way? This is a huge question, and these types of questions are asked through prototyping. And this definition of art really resonated with me, that art is the products of human creativity. And what's most important to think about this is that these products of human creativity need outlets. They're only as powerful as the platforms we place them upon and the means which they are communicated to the world. And the same thing goes for prototypes. How can we create outlets that will make these projects most effective and increase their ability to scale in the quickest way possible? And fundamentally, the most powerful outlet we have at our disposal is our public space, the spaces that we gather, the spaces we interact, and the spaces that are open and accessible to everyone. And so I'm really excited to tell you about our next project, which is called Urban Prototyping. And we're taking this model of expanded prototyping, taking more than a weekend, stringing these events together with education, with speakers and panels and events, but also with festivals and exhibitions outside in the public realm, and seeing what it looks like when these projects really take hold in a city. We think that outlets should look a little bit less like images on walls and a little bit more like the cities themselves. We think that when people are brought together, it should look less like a one-way dialogue or even a two-way conversation and more like people making things together. And we think that there should be less action items after people get together and more physical objects, more prototypes and more examples of what the future could look like, even if it's just a small example. What would it look like if we had less to-dos and more did-dos? Less action items and more actual items. So the main thing I want to ask all of you guys is the next time you sit down to do something, a hobby, a work project, a meeting, anything, just stop thinking for a little bit, stop talking, and start prototyping. Make something together. Don't just do it yourself. Bring people together to make things. I hope this is a job description that applies to a lot more people than just myself. As I said, I think everyone has the power to be an organizer. If you have a mailing list, you don't have an asset to spam people with, you have a responsibility to convene people, to prototype things, to build solutions together. It's an incredibly unique tool that people who convene groups of people have available to them. And I want to end by introducing you to one other person, which is my mom. My mom turns 60 next year, and she might not be really happy that I just told you guys that. But this is a picture of her at a hackathon. And I'm so excited to be able to say that my mom went to a hackathon, first of all. But this is the thing that she's been more excited about than anything I've seen her excited about in a really long time, which makes me, in turn, really excited. And this was at an event in Raleigh, my hometown, called City Camp, where people were developing solutions for government together using technology. And she built a project. She's a health educator. She worked with the city and the mayor to develop this project that they're now submitting as a new way of showing health impact assessment in the city to make Raleigh a healthier place. It's stricken with obesity and urban sprawl and things like that a lot of smaller cities are facing, but now they're prototyping solutions to these issues. So if my mom can do it, I hope you guys can too. So I want to end the same way I started by asking you guys a question. What will you do next weekend? And I hope it involves some level of prototyping. I don't want to guilt trip you guys into thinking that you shouldn't go to the beach or just hang out for a weekend or try to do this every single weekend, because that would make me a terrible person. But every once in a while, take it upon yourself to think that maybe I could do something this weekend that would change the world. And I hope you'll join me and my mom and thousands of other people around the world in not just believing, but ensuring that the revolution will be prototyped. Thank you.